session on parents in sport. Some key messages and things we're going to look at today. I guess parents exert a significant influence on their child's participation in sport, but also parental interaction with other persons within the sporting environment can either help or hinder their child's development. We're going to look at various different issues around parenting styles, relationships with their child, you as coaches dealing with parents in sport, and hopefully by the end of the session it gives you some tips and more insight into working with parents in your sporting sector. Because young athletes are minors and dependent children, parents play a major part in youth sport. In fact, youth sport would cease to exist without the cooperation, support and leadership of parents. So you may experience parents in terms of their kids dropping them off and helping out, or from actually parents leading sessions. Extreme examples of negative youth sport parenting earn a lot of media attention, but the majority of parents contribute positively to the success of youth sporting structures and the well-being of young athletes. So ultimately, we see all these kind of stories around, crazy parents on the sideline and things like that, but ultimately I think the positives outweigh the negatives. Equally important, sometimes overlooked, are parents' abilities to effectively navigate the world of youth sport for themselves, but also in helping their children. Parents' own past experiences affect how they view sport and how they can respond to their child's participation in sport. Therefore, the objective of this session is to explain how parents influence their children's participation in sport and how they are influenced by it as well in terms of their reactions. So the first thing to look at is actually the ultimate kind of start point, and I guess that's looking around the foundation of that parent-child relationship. So attachment is the kind of initial thing you'll see, especially when you're working with young children. This first sporting experiences are often stricken by issues around the kids not wanting their parents to go, getting upset, being left with another kind of adult to kind of look after them during their coaching session. Attachment is a deep emotional bond that connects the parent to the child. Attachment results in parents responding sensitively and appropriately to their child's needs, with parents becoming a secure base for their children. So I guess the important thing here is understanding attachment helps explain some of the irrational parent behaviours in youth sport. The emotional bond that parents have with their children, and which often leads to those short circuits in their rational sense and ability to reason when it comes to their children being mistreated or hurt or being distraught. And often, those types of scenarios in a day-to-day life, other than obviously things like in school and bullying and stuff, sport will have instances where there's negative impact on that, how that kid feels, or injury and so forth. Parents obviously feel deeply about their children and even feel what their kids are feeling. So it clearly influences their behaviour in youth sport as a parent. So this attachment and this relationship definitely has a strong impact on the child itself in taking part, but also the parent's behaviour. So examples, and I guess we see this through sport, when parents perceive that their child is treated poorly compared to other children, and when their child's not given the same opportunities as teammates, they are more likely to act inappropriately in sporting events. Research by Wiersma and Pfeiffer 2008 basically highlighted that parents admitted that observing their kids in a competitive environment often changed them from rational, good-natured adults to people who acted emotionally in explosive ways, and they later regretted their behaviour. Their behaviour appeared to be influenced by their parental attachment and instinct to protect their child from harm or unfair treatment. In the same research, attachment was also recognised to lead parents to more positive vicarious experiences, as in when they feel great joy for observing their child enjoyment, improvement and development and success in sport. So obviously this is kind of the positive side in terms of how they feel, but also that's that negative, which is obviously the thing that's often focused on within sporting settings. Moving on, looking at this parent-child relationship in further detail, another factor that influences youth sport parents is the idealised cultural norm regarded that means what it is to be good to be a parent. And cultural norms change as society changes, so parenting and the way they behave changes. So if you look back to kind of how kids were treated, 100 years ago, they were almost as commodities rather than how kids are treated now in terms of the kind of the golden child or the protected and the it's very much a nurturing from where kids were sent out to work, and back in the 1800s, with people, the kind of slums and all that kind of stuff. So things have changed in the way parents work with their kids, and even from like when I was a child to how children are treated now. So I'd go out and play and have more unstructured play and sporting settings, whereas now I think the culture is to have very much scheduled and organised sessions for children, and that overscheduling that we've talked about. So the important thing in this area is to increase your awareness of cultural changes in parenting ideals, so that you won't uncritically accept the current norm or parent and child relationship. So it's about understanding these kind of current norms. It's important to consider the effectiveness of current child rearing practices, and keep in mind both the optimal development of children and the well-being of the family members, including the parent. So it's about understanding kind of the current norms and the current relationships. So I mentioned the 1970s golden child enjoyed greater economic privilege. Even parents sacrificed to achieve this for their children. And now to present day is kind of this hothouse parenting idea that's led to a frenzy of overscheduled, tightly controlled, highly specialised, financial drained activities to push children to achieve. And this often occurs in sporting settings. So you can see the changes even in the last 30 to 40 years, not even, looking back as far as, the 1800s and so forth. The next area to consider in understanding, parents in sport is parenting styles. So what I'd like to do, quick little exercise for yourself, think about your parents and consider ways in which they interact with you, what they do or did not do, that influence your development, what made them effective or ineffective as parents. So have a think about, your sporting environment and how your parents behaved with you and how they supported you. Hopefully you spent a couple of minutes thinking about that, maybe jotting down some points. Your description of parents probably situates them in one of several categories of parenting styles. Parenting styles is an overall manner in which parents interact with their children based on parents' attitudes and values about what the relationship should be between the parent and child. This is by Darlin Steinberg, 1993. The most simplistic parent styles are based on levels of responsiveness and demandingness. Okay? Responsiveness is the extent to which parents support children's autonomy and respond to their needs. Demandingness, however, is the extent to which parents set limits and expectations and adherence to rules and mature behaviour. So as a result of this responsiveness and demandingness, there's ultimately kind of forced parenting styles emerge from different combinations of responsiveness and demandingness. The following diagram basically demonstrates the key kind of parenting styles. Obviously there's more models and ideas around this, is just one example. So you've got in the middle line, you've got the low demandingness to the high demandingness, and then you've got the high responsiveness to the low responsiveness. And that basically creates either a neglectful, authoritative, or permissive parenting style. I'm now going to explain how that kind of impacts on each other and where they come from in terms of responsiveness and demandingness. So authoritative parenting style is both responsiveness, or high in responsiveness and high in demandingness. It involves setting high standards and limits, showing that respect and reasoning with kids, and being nurturing and responsive to their emotional needs. So the things a parent like this might say is, I encourage my child to talk about their feelings, I provide my child with reason for expectations and so forth. A parent with, however, on the same side in terms of high demandingness is the high authoritarian, which is a low responsive. Parents with authoritarian parenting style are demanding but less responsive. They emphasise obedience without explanation or attempting to reason with the children. Those with the permissive parenting style are high in reasoning but less in demanding. They are reluctant to impose rules and standards and thus provide little structure, preferring to let the children regulate themselves. The final one is the neglectful parenting styles, and neither demanding nor responsive, and disengaged and unsupportive. So here you can see, from explaining that model and the levels of responsiveness and demandingness, where maybe your parent might sit, thinking back to the first questions. So focusing on the kind of positive area, which I think you can probably identify as that top left, authoritative parenting styles, which often leads to more positive outcomes for children and adolescents in terms of satisfaction, academic competence, higher self-esteem, and lower risky health behaviours. And this is by Horn and Horn 2007. There's been various different research done in this area, particularly in a sporting context. And, you know, authoritative parenting predicted greater athlete satisfaction and compliance with rules, team cohesion and motivation. This was in youth ice hockey. And then it was also associated with healthy compared to unhealthy perfectionism in youth soccer players. So this, you know, authoritative parenting style had a positive impact on those two sports. Finally, authoritative or autonomy supported parents is identified as the most important component of youth sport parenting experience. It's by Harvard and Knight 2005. So you can see it's not just kind of going, right, my parents this and it's been a positive experience. There's actually research to back up these key points. And so, you know, ultimately what we're aiming towards is, if we've got parents working in our sporting sector with us, is that we're trying to help them not just nurture our athletes and performers, but nurture them as parents to help them become that authoritative parenting style in terms of responsiveness and demand. You may not have a great impact on that, but there's things you can do in sport to kind of engage and help with that process. In conclusion to this kind of section on understanding the parent-child relationship, I guess it's understanding, you know, attachment, the cultural norms of parenting and the parenting in styles to explain, you know, and how they influence parent behaviour in youth sport. Parents act based on their deep emotional connections with their child and try to culturally prescribe to that kind of good parent ideal, and which obviously links to their parent style and values and beliefs. So keeping these foundations of a parent-child relationship in mind enables us to understand both the positive and negative parent behaviour in youth sport. So why are parents acting and behaving irrationally? You might think, oh my god, they're completely crazy, why are they doing this? Well, hopefully some of the points we've discussed gives you an insight into kind of rationale and the reason for that behaviour. And understanding that then hopefully enables you to cope and deal with those situations when they arise.